The death toll rises in Ecuador after Saturday's 7.8 magnitude earthquake, and Brazil's Senate gets ready to vote on impeaching their president. Those are our headlines. My name is Reagan, Vignes, and this is From the South. Thank you so much for joining us. Aid continues to arrive in the coastal cities of Ecuador, the most affected areas of Saturday's earthquake. President Correa helped in the delivery of aid, together with the United Nations convoy. So far, over 90 people have been rescued from the rubble. Authorities are organizing a volunteer campaign nationwide to further assist those who need it most. And neighbors and volunteers are clearing the rubble, finding personal belongings of the survivors and trying to clear the damage. Water is also being distributed along the small, harder-to-reach towns, and dozens of community kitchens have been opened to assist in feeding those without food. The death toll after Ecuador's earthquake is now at 553. Our correspondent Lucho Granados has more updates, reporting from the small coastal town Hama.
I'm in Hama, on the coast of Ecuador, a city of 20,000 people, which has also experienced significant devastation. Officials tell us 90 to 95% of the buildings here have either fallen or are now uninhabitable. We've passed the critical 72-hour period, and efforts now move from rescue to recovery, with residents trying to recover what they can from their homes and government officials trying to provide relief to those who survived the earthquake.
President Rafael Correa also spoke to the nation, explaining that water is no longer scarce in the affected areas and that authorities are trying to ensure its distribution.
They are units from the community police. We have hundreds scattered all over the country. Then we saw that the best way to organize ourselves for water, supplies, and food from the community police. We are just starting to implement the system. That's why I've been here for 2 to 3 hours to start with the first UPC. This will take place in the whole province.
To Brazil now, the impeachment process against President Dilma Rousseff has entered a new stage as the Senate prepares to vote. The Senate will set up a commission on Monday to review the documents related to President Rousseff's impeachment. The leadership of the Senate says it will make a final vote by or before May 17th. And controversy has sparked over the vote of lawmaker Jair Bolsonaro, who publicly dedicated his impeachment vote to Carlos Alberto Brejante, a brutal official of Brazil's last military dictatorship.
Regarding the words of the lawmaker you are referring to, Jair Bolsonaro, I think it's lamentable. I was imprisoned in the 70s, and I knew the man he is referring to, Carlos Alberto Brillante Ustra, is responsible for tortures in Sao Paulo between 1970 and 1974. He was one of Brazil's biggest torturers. He was one of Brazil's biggest torturers, and he is not only accused of torture, but he's also accused of murder.
Taxi drivers in Buenos Aires continue to protest the launch of the popular Uber transportation app. The drivers are demanding that authorities respond since Uber does not pay Social Security. Similar responses have been registered throughout Latin America. Most recently, the Chilean government expelled the company from the country due to pressure from taxi drivers and users. Thousands of laid-off workers joined thousands of others in a march to protest against the price hikes being implemented since Mauricio Macri took office. Since Macri's government began just over 4 months ago, the number of poor people in the country has increased to over 1 million. The United Nations Special Session on International Drugs allowed world leaders and UN officials to debate the direction of global drug policies. Our correspondent Clayton Khan has more from Mexico.
On Tuesday's inauguration of the 3-day UN Special Session on International Drug Policy, some high-ranking UN officials made the argument that the sharply criticized status quo prohibition policies should maintain its course.
We don't need really new approaches to global drug policy. Quite to the contrary. What we need is to better implement the principles of the drug control treaties, which require a balanced and comprehensive approach where health and welfare is at the core of the policy.
Yet, some world leaders challenged this argument. President Enrique Peña Nieto of Mexico, one of the 3 Latin American countries that called for the UN session in 2012, acknowledged the growing global choir of criticisms against prohibition drug policies that seek to criminalize.
Before the limitations of the prohibition paradigm, the global drug theme should be attended through a human rights perspective. That is the only way we can offer integral and balanced response that promotes development. This substantial change implies modifying the specifically criminalizing focus.
Yet, while Peña Nieto ultimately argues that the criminalization of consumers of narcotic substances should be reduced, he subtly reiterated Mexico's criticized stance of confronting and combating narcotics producers and traffickers, which human rights defenders argue has been the policy that has sustained nearly a decade of staggering levels of violence in the country and region.
We must intensify the cooperation between our governments and extend the exchange of information and joint operations so as to dismantle criminal organizations.
Activists and families of victims of the so-called drug war argue that the militarization strategy that has left more than 100,000 dead and 27,000 disappeared in Mexico produces greater harm at the individual and collective level than the consumption of drugs. They also say it produces a fertile terrain for corruption, undermines the rights of communities over their resources and territory, and fundamentally disintegrates social fabric.
It is not a war on any plant or any substance. This is a war against people and communities. In that sense, it has served to legitimise the Merida Initiative, the anti-immigration Southern Border Plan, the militarisation of police forces in all of our countries, hurting the population and defending the interests of the elite, whether that be political or economic.
Yet activists and victims do express optimism that a paradigm shift in terms of global drug policies is imminent. Specifically in Mexico, it is expected that Peña Nieto will announce on Thursday a plan to legalize the medical use of marijuana. Clayton Khan, teleSur's, Mexico's.
More than 300 disabled individuals in Bolivia have been marching for almost a month, campaigning for more financial support from their government. They want a regular monthly allowance to help them achieve a better quality of life. With more on this, we go to our Bolivia correspondent, Dimitri O'Donnell.
More than 300 of Bolivia's disabled citizens slowly make their way along a main highway towards La Paz. They've been on the road for almost a month, covering just over 300 kilometers and risking their lives on Bolivia's notoriously dangerous stretch of highway. It's all to demand an increase in their annual state allowance of $145.
Who can live on 2 Bolivianos per day? Who can live on that? This is why we are asking for a monthly income of 500 Bolivianos per month for all people with disabilities.
Elderly disabled campaigners, people with physical and intellectual disabilities, and mothers of children with special needs like Maria say they need more financial support from the government.
Life is hard. All the mothers that have children with special needs are super mothers. They have a strength and a force that keeps them going. We fall, but we get back up day after day with more strength.
Many of those on the road have severe physical disabilities and their journey has not been easy. Some have fallen ill because of exhaustion and others had to be hospitalised because of hypothermia from weeks of sleeping outdoors.
We have been on the road for more than 25 days and we really have gone through everything. The cold has been the hardest. All of us almost got sick at the peak. There is no light and just straight wind. Then there's the sun. Our lips have dried out and are burned.
The government says it will meet the demonstrators when they arrive in La Paz, inspiring them to continue their grueling journey. But as they slowly inch their way towards La Paz, they say their resolve remains undiminished. They won't back down until the government commits more resources and support for its disabled citizens. Dimitri O'Donnell, teleSur's, La Paz.
In the United States, 3 government employees have been charged in connection with the Flint water crisis. The charges were brought against Utilities Administrator Mike Glasgow, Quality District Water Supervisor Stephen Bush, and District Water Engineer Mike Priceby. Attorney General Bill Schwett said that this is only the beginning.
Each and every person who breaks the law will be held accountable. We'll follow the facts without fear or favor, and we'll go wherever the truth takes us. And in this case, wherever the emails take us. These charges are only the beginning, and there'll be more to come. That I can guarantee you.
Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have been announced as the winners of the New York primaries, but some 125,000 independent voters were not able to cast their ballots. That figure included Eric Garner's daughter, who is a prominent supporter of Bernie Sanders. This is because New York has a closed primary system, so only voters registered with a party can vote. The deadline to register with a party was back in October 2015. The United States and Gulf Arab countries have agreed to deploy joint patrols to intercept ships smuggling Iranian weapons to Yemen. The Secretary General of the GCC said that the bloc and the U.S. would stage joint maritime patrols to stop weapons smuggling from Iran. The agreement was reached during a meeting between U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter and his Gulf Arab counterparts on Tuesday. Carter is part of the delegation accompanying President Barack Obama during his visit. Norwegian mass murderer Anders Behring Breivik has won part of a human rights case against the Norwegian state. The court upheld Breivik's claim that some of what he experienced amounted to, quote, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, end quote. The court ruled that Norway did indeed violate his human rights by keeping him in isolation after he was sentenced for killing 77 people in 2011. After the judgment, Breivik's lawyer called for his solitary confinement to be repealed. The European Union will propose visa-free travel for Turks if Turkey meets remaining conditions in the migration deal with the bloc. So far, over 300 irregular migrants have been returned to Turkey from Greece, and over 100 Syrian refugees have been resettled across the EU. Ukrainians may also see visa requirements lifted. The NATO-Russia Council has met for the first time in 2 years. The alliance had cut off all practical ties with Moscow to protest the annexation of Crimea from Ukraine.
Our position was very clear from the beginning. We were ready to talk. This was the decision of NATO to stop all projects of cooperation that were very successful and were very important for security of the NATO-Russia Council. But we are open for the dialogue, and our position has not changed.
Algeria's Minister of Maghreb Affairs has visited Libya to show support for the UN-backed unity government. Algeria hopes to be the first country to reopen an embassy in Libya. Algeria hosted several rounds of UN-brokered Libyan peace talks that helped pave the way for a December power-sharing deal under which the Government of National Accord was formed. Houthi negotiators left Sana'a for peace talks between the Yemeni government and Houthi militants in Kuwait. The Houthis agreed to participate following assurances that pro-government forces would respect a ceasefire. That's according to the United Nations. The talks are the most important attempt yet to resolve Yemen's devastating conflict. According to the UN, more than 6,000 people have been killed and almost 3 million have been forced from their homes. 7 policemen were killed in a Taliban attack during an anti-polio drive in the Pakistani city of Karachi. 8 gunmen carried out the killings in 2 separate attacks. The polio workers who were unarmed in the attack were on the 3rd day of an immunization drive. Government officials said the immunization drive would be suspended while the violence was being investigated. Mitsubishi has admitted that it falsified fuel efficiency tests in more than 600,000 vehicles. This is the biggest scandal at Mitsubishi Motors since a defects cover-up more than a decade ago. The problem was found after Nissan pointed out inconsistencies in data. The U.S. Treasury Department is expected to announce Wednesday that anti-slavery crusader Harriet Tubman will replace former President Andrew Jackson on the U.S. $20 bill, a spokesperson said. Tubman would be the first woman featured on the face of U.S. paper currency in more than a decade. Chile's National Police Force has recovered the body of a 100-mile runner who had participated in the second edition of the Ultra Fjord race in Patagonia. The body of Arturo Hector Martinez Rueda was discovered on Tuesday. Authorities say he died after 2 a.m. local time on April 16th while taking part in the challenging competition. Puerto Natales chief prosecutor said the likely cause of Rueda's death was hypothermia, but added that confirmation would be made in the coming days. The annual blooming of wild bluebells in Belgium's Hallebros forest has begun to attract several hundred visitors from across the world. The forest is also known as the Blue Forest because for a few weeks around mid-April, between 250 and 300 hectares of bluebell flowers form a purple bell carpet that give the forest a magical feel. And that's our news this evening. For more on these and other stories, you can visit our website, telesurtv.net/English, or you can join us on Instagram, Facebook, and on Twitter for Telesur English. My name is Reagan. Have a great night.